Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, May 24th, 2016. The opening prayer will be given by Reverend Dean Warburton of the First Congregational Church. Please rise.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we give thanks for this night and for the opportunity to be together. We ask your blessing upon the residents of this community, upon all who serve in our positions of leadership and government, upon the first responders of our community who serve the needs of our people. And having recently joined the Senior Center, I ask your blessing upon the Senior Center and all the seniors of this community. We give you thanks for all of the ways in which we work together to achieve a greater good. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the religious institutions of this town. They bring a great cultural diversity and tradition to our community, which we cherish. Now pour out the abundance of your blessing upon this, the town council, upon their deliberations, upon all those who serve in government, and grant that your wisdom may abide in and through them. All this we ask in your name, loving God. Amen.
We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go on to the roll call, I'm going to do something a little unusual. Note that I was paying attention to Reverend Warburton's prayer tonight. He did mention that he joined the Senior Center, and that bears some relevance and significance. I want to thank you for being here tonight. You may not know this, but I have little to do with the rotation of who comes to open with our prayer before the meetings. I kind of leave that up to staff, but I did ask that you be here tonight because next month you are in fact retiring. Is that correct? Yep. After, is it 24?
21 years here, 24 years in total.
So 21 years. 21 years in Wallingford's First Congregational Church, 44 total years with the clergy. You've been in the rotation to say our opening prayers as long as I've been on the council, so I'm sure it's been going on longer than that because I haven't been here all that long. I do happen to be a member of the church where you've been for the past 21 years. And I wanted to thank you for participating in our town council meetings for as long as you have. We certainly value that you contribute to opening our meetings, and I want to acknowledge your great accomplishments and recognize your retirement, and I hope you're going to stick around. If you've joined the Senior Center, you're going to be in town, right? So we will see you around, but thank you very much, Reverend Warburton. With that, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Shortell.
Present.
Sullivan. Testa.
Here.
Zandri.
Here.
Chairman Cervoni.
Here. For the record, Councilor Sullivan did advise me that he had a work-related conflict preventing him from being here tonight. Moving along, the next thing we're going to do tonight is recognize the 2016 champions for Youth Mentor, the award recipients. Craig, if you would.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Just have a brief statement to read before we actually present these awards for those that may not have an understanding or awareness of this program. Thank you first for providing the opportunity to recognize the inaugural class of Wallingford's Champions for Youth mentors tonight at this council meeting. These individuals were selected for their outstanding commitment to mentoring Wallingford's youth. These champions were identified during Wallingford's Red Ribbon Week campaign, a week dedicated to educating our community about the benefits of making positive choices and living a healthy, substance-free lifestyle, as well as the risks associated with the misuse and abuse of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. This week-long initiative is a collaboration among the Wallingford Youth and Social Services Department, the Mayor's Council on Substance Abuse Prevention, and the Coalition for a Better Wallingford. It has been said that what is honored in a community is cultivated within the community. Tonight's recognition of these champions for youth is more than just an award ceremony. The act of recognition here in this meeting demonstrates that in Wallingford, we highly value and appreciate the honorable deed of individuals serving our youth with their time and their talents for the sole and express purpose of improving their well-being, and it is fitting that we do so. At this time, I would like to invite the individuals representing the Coalition for a Better Wallingford, Ken Welch and Shauna Glidden, and Maria Harlow, who is the chairman of the Mayor's Council on Substance Abuse Prevention, to approach the stage. I would also like to invite Mayor Dickinson and Chairman Cervoni to join them as well. It's my pleasure to identify these mentors. For the mentors in the audience, as I call your name, please come forward to receive your award, and I believe Ken will direct you where to stand. Bill Donegan, representing Yalesville Little League. Joey Mira, representing Yalesville Little League. I'm going to ask that you hold your applause to the end because we could be here a long time if we don't. Richard Miller and Caitlin Miller, representing Wallingford Girls Softball. Josh Carroll and Jake Seichter, representing Wallingford Little League. Gabriel Mattis, representing the public schools, Wallingford Public Schools. Robert Wojcik, representing the Boys and Girls Club, and Jaisha Alvarado, representing the Boys and Girls Club. Dominic Colavito, representing the Wallingford Parks and Rec Department. Pat Hackett, representing Wallingford Hawks. Tim Penton and Jordan Davis, representing the Wallingford Vikings. Laura Juarez, representing SCOW. And Marina DeSimian and Neil Robeson, representing Wallingford Lacrosse. So we want to make sure we get your pictures. So follow the directions of the photographer. And I'm going to ask that the adult representatives would join them. I think we want to get that recognition of the significance of this event. One of the hallmarks of town government is to provide and identify and serve the general citizenry of its community, and I can't think of a more significant manner in identifying how our youth are served in this community by volunteers who give selflessly of their time and their talents. Let's give them a hand. So for those of you who came to support the mentors, and for others in the audience, if you're interested, there are some refreshments in the lobby at the front of the building towards the Main Street exit, and I invite you to get to know them a little bit more. Thank you.
We'll give things a minute to quiet down. All right, moving along to item 3, the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve and accept consent agenda items A through L and N through JJ.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Please note the one no vote. And then moving along to item 4, the one item removed from the consent agenda is item 3M.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the donations for the 2016 fireworks display from the following constituencies. Yelbrick Metals Incorporated, $5,000. The Latimer Group, $1,000. Live Nation Toyota Oakdale Theater, $12,000. KCE Building Corporation, $5,000. Component Engineers Incorporated, $1,000. Choate Rosemary Hall, $1,000. And Robert F. Parisi, $1,000. And that we amend the appropriation to the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget of $30,000 to the revenue and donations account.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Just a correction for the motion. The Choate Rosemary Hall donation was $5,000.
Do I need to read all this?
You don't have to. And the revenue, the appropriation is listed in the agenda. Moved and seconded. Councilor Fishbein, this was your removal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you very much for your yeoman efforts in getting this done this year. Ordinarily we perhaps pull something off of consent when one is opposed, and I'm not opposed to the acceptance of the funds and the utilization of the funds. I just think it would be to our benefit if we had a discussion as to where do we go from here. Is it the, I see this as a Band-Aid for this year. Is it the job of the council chair to, in the future, solicit these kinds of things? I don't expect the mayor to budget for it, and I don't want to have the battle next year over this. I think I probably, in the future, will put together a resolution of some form testing the council's feelings on the fireworks in general and whether or not it should continue. I mean, that's not before us tonight. But I guess the other thing I'd like to bring up is the bidding for this goes through the Park and Rec Department. And I guess I question why the funds are going to the Public Celebrations Committee as part of this. So those are the things that I'd like to see us discuss. And I turn it back over to you for wherever that goes.
Thank you. I want to limit discussion about the future because that's not really what's on the agenda, but I'll address some of it. First of all, to me, this is not very different than what's been done since 2009 or 2010 when Councilor Zandri, before he was a councilor, created a fund and to his credit, did a significant amount of fundraising for the past several years and did support the event, and it was funded that way. This year I was aware that Councilor Zandri wasn't in a position to do that again, and so I wanted to see that the event occurred, and quite frankly, I thought we had more important things to talk about during the budget sessions than $30,000 for fireworks. Not that the event's not important, but whether or not it's part of the budget to me is financially a relatively insignificant amount. That being said, in the course of my conversations with people about fundraising for this year's fireworks, some told me that they would like to participate again next year, and others approached me to say that they'd like to have the opportunity to participate next year as a business donor. I don't know that I want to necessarily compel future chairmen to take on this obligation, but I am certainly willing to plan to do this next year. With respect to the rest of your inquiry, I think at this point the mayor is in the best position to probably answer your questions about which lines, which department, the Park and Rec Department, why it's funded or bid through there and so forth. So, Mayor, if you would, Councilor Fishbein had some questions about why the funding is allocated the way it is, why the bid for the fireworks themselves is done by Park and Rec.
Well, Park and Rec had the contacts with the various businesses, and they were in a position to be able to do that. At one point, we were talking about what kind of specs we should have. It really got kind of crazy, you know, how many 3-inch shells and how many 5-inch shells. It's just a convoluted process. So to ask volunteers to do that, I think is stretching their ability a good deal. But historically, the fireworks were funded through the public celebrations. So we just left it that they would continue to do that if there were funds, but that the details of dealing with vendors and the nuances of placing business with our purchasing department, et cetera, should be handled by a department that's more familiar with that.
Yes, you may.
I was part of that discussion about 3-inch shells or 6-inch shells, so you know, I am aware of that. And I don't disagree that Park and Rec is the one to do this. And I think Park and Rec is the one who's in a position to, when they submit a proposed budget to you, Mayor, that perhaps they put a number in their budget and then have you perhaps strike it instead of what we have dealt with. So, you know, the question is, if Park and Rec is doing the bid, why does it need to go through public celebrations at all? Because it's just a pass-through, as many of the things with public celebrations are. But why not just make it part of the Park and Rec budget?
Because they're willing to still continue that function, and out of courtesy to them, and there is the history of them doing it. It is a public celebration event. I mean, certainly it's not just a Park and Rec event. It is a public celebration event. So to recognize their contributions over the years, they were still interested in doing that, and that's why we do it that way.
Okay, I see this to a step to it going away, because what I see happening in the future is it won't be funded in the mayor's budget, and it'll be too late. And that's what my crystal ball shows into the future, and that's unfortunate, but you know, I'm glad that we're doing what we're doing this year. I just, you know, it'd be a totally different thing if somebody came to us and said, hey, let's have a fireworks celebration. And it was a new thing, but this is not a new thing. And I'm not going to beat the drum anymore on that, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, just, you know, there are a lot of things that don't make it through the budget process. I mean, this happens to be one, but there's a long list of items that are not funded. So, you know, I don't think there's any guarantee on almost any item that's in the budget that it is always going to be there. We just can't do that, and with the pressures that we're all aware of regarding revenues, I suspect in the future there's going to be even a longer list of unfundable items. So that's a reality. What ultimately gets funded is a mixture of what we see with this year's budget. Some things can be afforded and some can't, but that's going to be an agonizing effort, I suspect, for every year for the foreseeable future.
May I?
Briefly.
Yes. I'm just concerned because when we brought it up during the budget, I asked why Public Celebrations did not put it in their budget. And the response we got was, it's like spitting in the wind. And I just don't find that to be acceptable. So I would rather have Park and Rec put it in their budget if they're the ones that are willing to do that and go from there. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of want to add to Councilor Fishbein's sentiment, and I'm in agreement. I understand, the mayor made the comment that, there's a lot of things that are in the budget that don't make it through, but to Councilor Fishbein's point, it was never even asked of and struck down. It was never included. And I really think that it belongs to be the responsibility of whatever group has it, whether it's Park and Rec, whether it's Celebrations, whomever has it, if they desire to do it, to add it to the budget, if they feel it's something pertinent that the town should do, and then let the mayor make the decisions that the mayor has to make. We can discuss it as we want to the council if we want to make any amendments. It's really no different than, let's say, I'll use an example, like I don't want to use something that's a need, I'll do a want. We'll do something from WCI. If they wanted to do something additional this year and it required them to ask for an additional 10 grand, they would add it. And the mayor would look over the budget and say, it's 10,000 more than you asked last year. I'm not going to approve it. As a matter of fact, because things are getting tighter, I'm removing an additional 7,000 on top of it. The fireworks never get added anymore to even be struck down. And I think it's important that if someone's given the charge of something, whether it's a professional courtesy or a time-honored courtesy, that they drive it like they own it and say, look, we were always responsible for it. The monies were always in our budget. We're going to ask for them, with all the understanding that the mayor's likely to strike them. But that I feel is the charge. So with that, I agree with the sentiment of Councilor Fishbein. I'm glad to see that the donations have come in and that we're going to have an event this year, weather permitting. And I do think it does need to be addressed, because what will happen is kind of what was outlined. The budget will come in, it won't be asked for, and then we're at the disadvantage of trying to add it in. So with that, I'll just wrap up my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Fishbein.
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. On to item 5, the public question and answer period. Mr. Gross, maintain your momentum.
I'm going downhill, so it's pretty easy. Oh yeah, Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Thank you. I had a question to the chair and to the mayor. Now that budget season's over and you have your new budget, are you going to, there were some thoughts during the budget processing season that maybe you should be looking for additional sources of revenue. Are we going to see any action by the council or the mayor's office in trying to initiate cost savings during the year or additional revenue sources? Because as a rule, we do not see that from the mayor's office. Council too.
We are seeking grants all of the time, but the issue before the state and this town is not more revenue. The issue is reduction in expenditures. The revenue sought will never cover all that is being asked for. We could see that in this year's budget. There aren't grants enough from the state of Connecticut and the federal government combined. We are constantly seeking grants, and we will continue to do so.
Council? There's not, no. Because it's not only grants, Mr. Mayor. There are ways of cost savings that you can initiate through studies. Trash removal was one of the things that came up. Technology. I know that the electric division is going to hopefully move to LED lights. It would be nice to see LED lights with Wi-Fi attached to them, so town would become Wi-Fi throughout the town. That would be a nice little addition for the community at a very relatively low cost. These are things that would make Wallingford a greater town to be in, and there are ways to do this. So, Mr. Mayor, are you going to do those type of studies? The school is here too, and there's always discussion whether you want 11 schools, 10 schools, not always discussion, but at some point you have to do that study. Are you going to do any of these things that potentially could save the taxpayers money and bring in less expenses, is the way you term it?
We're always interested in ways of saving money. We've done the energy reviews on, I believe, just about every building that the town has, and those measures are being implemented. As you mentioned, the LEDs, it's $300,000, I believe, in the coming budget in order to do some of the lights in town. I believe it's a total cost of some $600,000 or more, and it's spread over at least 2 years. So we are doing those things.
I don't think so. Are you going to do a study on the trash removal? The LED lights, are you looking to see if they can be Wi-Fi enabled? Any of those types of things that would make the community greater than it is and bring more enjoyment to the citizens. And LED lights, this has been on the, I don't know, nothing against the PUC, but they've been on Woodhouse for how many years now? So every year that we haven't gone to LED lights is every year we've not saved additional cost savings. Yes, you have to spend money, but you have to spend money to save money.
Well, Mr. Gross, as you know, the lights on Woodhouse Avenue were part of a study. They needed to gain a sense of what is longevity, what is the experience with them. They had a number of vendors put the lights out there. Once the results were in, now we're in a process of being able to implement putting the lights up. But that was a study, and you're seeing the ultimate results of it.
I'm not going to get into it, the Mayor, but I just hope the council would initiate some of these or look at their own things, cost savings that could potentially lead to, when you have the budget season next year, there isn't these arguments over a lousy $30,000 for fireworks. Thank you.
Ms. Morgenstein.
Gina Morgenstein, South Main Street. Yeah, I wasn't going to come up, but I'd like to echo what Bob has to say, because the fact is that, Mr. Mayor, our doom and gloom is to our own detriment. We are a community that reached out to some corporations and very successfully took over from citizens that raised money for the fireworks. We should be looking at community cooperation. We should be looking at the value of these corporations. We should be looking at our citizens. We should be looking at cost saving that, yes, may require a little bit of spending, but rather than the way we do it every year, here's what we wish and here's only what we can have. The Board of Ed, the school system is our biggest cost, but it's also our biggest benefit. If you're looking to buy a house in this community, every year you cut from them, you're going to find that you're getting cut from people wanting to choose our community. So far we've managed, but I see us at a trend. And yes, part of that trend has to do with Washington and Hartford and our economy in general, but I think we'd have to admit that our town lags behind some other towns of comparable popularity with where we go for activities. People still, and are more so, rushing to Wallingford to go to our restaurants. I work in Waterbury, and a woman who lives in East Hampton comes to Wallingford to use our restaurants. Well, all it's going to take is one or two of those to no longer be here, and the bottom of the hill to not rise to the level of the top of the hill, and we're going to see that falling off. So we have to invest in our economic development, and we have to invest in our Chamber of Commerce, and we have to forge relationships with our businesses. You have to invest to grow, and we are not going to survive if we don't grow. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the public? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Brashears.
Shorter than they are. Candace Brashears, 90 North Airline Road. I chair the Historic Properties Commission, as you know. And my question to the council is my first comment is our great surprise to learn that the council is even considering repealing the ordinance that establishes this commission. And we learn it in the newspaper. My question to the council is, when is the council going to notify the commissioners that this is under consideration and the reasons why?
There was an office oversight that resulted in the commission's failure to be notified that this matter was on the agenda for the ordinance committee at the beginning of this month. As a result of that, we are going to bring the matter back to the ordinance committee. I believe that meeting will be June 2nd, and we will make sure that the commission members are notified of that meeting.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments from the public? There being none, I close the public question and answer period and move on to item 6.
Mr. Chairman, I move we appropriate $300,000 from retained earnings to the conservation expenses as a budget amendment for the electric division.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Staff from the electric division approach, as do a member of the Public Utilities Commission. If you'd remind us who you are for our record.
Yep. Bob Beaumont, Chairman of the PUC.
Sharon Emmons, Energy Efficiency Specialist at the Wallingford Electric Division.
And Tom Sullivan with the Business Office Electric Division.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. When I reviewed this item and I was preparing the agenda, I found it curious, and so I thought it'd benefit the public to understand what the statute mandates that we do, how it affects our electric rates, and the impact and what is then done with that money. So if you could, in a reasonable amount of time, answer those questions, I think.
Then you don't want me to talk.
You said that, nobody else did.
I'm trying to be fair, Vin.
Thank you.
All right. Basically, we get money primarily from one source. That's a quarter cent a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour sale that we make. By law, we are expected to go ahead and collect that, just as the investor-owned utilities are. So this equates to north of 1.5 million. In addition to that, we get money from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Here again, that's money that we are supposed to be spending. To that end, we have the good fortune of having Sharon Emmons as our conservation specialist. She has done an absolutely phenomenal job for us as far as I'm concerned over the course of the last several years, both when she was doing it on a part-time basis as customer service manager and now on a full-time basis as the conservation energy specialist. In terms of going out, making sure that our customers, that this money gets reinvested into the customer's plant, be it industry, be it commercial, be it residential. And she's done an absolutely phenomenal job. With that in mind, I will pass it to my right.
What is it that we can explain to you? Specifically, what would you like to hear from us tonight?
I think you need to be closer to the microphone.
I'm sorry, what exactly can we explain to you tonight that would be helpful?
Well, the various sources of these funds, the impact on our rates, and then, what it is that's available for the public as a result of the existence of these funds.
Well, as Mr. Beaumont indicated, we collect 2.5 mils per kilowatt hour of electricity sold. That results in about $1.5 million a year available in the fund to be available to our customers to do energy efficiency projects or take part in our programs. About 60% of it is collected from commercial industrial customers, and it is available to them through programs. The other 40% is available to residential customers, available to them. The money that we get from Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is made available as part of the big pot to the residential customers. So just so you know where the money's going. The residential programs include the home energy savings, home audits, and the other rebates that are available, HVAC, heat pump water heaters, and attic insulation. I do a light bulb giveaway once or twice a year where light bulbs are delivered directly to homes at no cost to the customer. And we also subsidize through a program called the Negotiated Cooperative Purchase Program, 5 area stores where the prices on energy-efficient bulbs are bought down so people in the community can buy them at a much reduced price. And we've been able to distribute a large number of LED bulbs to the community that way. That's the residential customers. On the commercial industrial side, we have a lighting retrofit program where lighting can be replaced with more efficient lighting, and we incent that 40% of the project cost before taxes. We also offer programs where we pay the difference between a piece of energy-efficient equipment versus what a standard, less efficient piece would cost. We pay 40% of the difference to incent our commercial industrial customers to invest in a more expensive but more energy-efficient solution.
Which are all terrific things. Right after my wife and I bought our house, we did take advantage of an energy audit, and it was a terrific experience. The contractor that came did a terrific job, and then we later took advantage of the attic insulation and some other things. I guess my next question would be, do you find that the electric division customers, both residential and commercial, are really taking advantage of these programs?
The program has grown since we have not been part of CMEC, and that happened at the end of 2013. Judging from the expenditures, the way the expenditures have gone up every year, more and more people are taking advantage of it. More and more of that money is being spent. When we left CMEC, we had a carryover from prior years. Money had been collected but not spent. And so slowly that money's being spent down. Last year, I believe I hit my budget right on the nose, spent everything that was collected. But now we're getting in, this year is doing even better, so that some of that money that's carried forward is also getting spent finally. We touch, I think it's over 16,000 customers. When you look at how many people take advantage of the light bulb giveaways, people who actually buy light bulbs at the discounted rates in the 5 area stores, and many commercial industrial customers take advantage of the program. There's a lot of smaller commercial industrial places that do small projects, and there's some of the larger, what we call rate 5, our very largest customers, who also do projects. So we touch very many of our customers.
Thank you.
With our programs.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from councilors? Councilor Letourneau?
Good evening. I just want to make a comment that the program, the subsidy program that you do through some of the box stores for the LED bulbs, I see just a tremendous increase of people going there. I know they come into my store, and obviously we talk lighting, and I show them what the new LEDs are and where they can get them, and they weren't too thrilled with the compact fluorescents, but the LEDs, they're really buying onto those. And if they buy one, they go back and buy more. So I'd like to see that really, continue as much as possible, because I think that's a big impact that, myself and maybe some of the, the hardware store, I know they send people there for the LED bulbs also.
Yeah, the CFLs were never meant to be a long-term solution. It was sort of use these until the LED technology was perfected, and that once the research and development costs are recovered, the prices would come down. And we're seeing that now.
Yeah. It's a great program. I just wanted to make that
It's surprising. We put a card in the customer bills once or twice a year for this light bulb giveaway. It's just the cost of a stamp to get these bulbs. And it's pretty consistent. I get about 7,000 customers every time that respond. There's 21,000 residential bills that go out, and 7,000 respond. The other 14,000, I guess, are throwing it away or something. I don't know. It's a shame, but pretty consistent response.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the public? Mr. Gross?
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. So you're transferring this money, it's just money that you've already taken in, and you just have to put it to the right spot. What other items could this money be used for?
That money by statute was collected for energy.
You could talk, you don't have to face me.
The money was collected under the statute for energy conservation, and the statute states that it is to be used for customers to do energy efficiency projects. And it's up to us to develop a plan to do that, which we do, and we file it with the State Energy Efficiency Board and operate to that plan.
So it's for, customers have to do it, or can the electric division do projects that save the consumers, the customers, money?
It's not up to us to do projects, it's up to us to fund projects requested by customers. Customers can include government agencies. I've issued incentives to many, to schools and government buildings. The town of Wallingford has partaken of the programs, but it's not for me to say what those projects should be.
So the magic word is then, would this, a customer comes forward, can we ask for solar? And would the town be more than, would this qualify?
There's money available for solar projects. It's up to a customer to approach us with the project. We would, make sure that it meets the energy efficiency criteria, and if it does, there is incentive money available.
Can you give us some idea of what kind of incentives there are for solar then?
For a residential project right now, the maximum incentive for the perfectly sited project is about $5,100. On the commercial industrial side, it depends upon the project. I can't throw a number out. It would depend upon the size and the efficiency of the project, what the incentives might be.
So if a customer came to town, a commercial customer, and wants to retrofit a building and wants to do solar on it, then they would, because they are going from the Wallingford Electric Division rates to an energy saving amount, would something of that nature qualify?
The solar project would qualify for money that has been set aside for renewable projects.
I think one thing we can't miss here, it must meet efficiency standards. And very often, because of our rates, it doesn't meet that standard.
Explain that.
You can't save enough money.
One of the problems with the residential projects is that it's hard for them to make sense from a long-term investment point of view, because our rates are very reasonable. We've done very few residential projects because once you look at the numbers, the payback period is way too long, or there is no payback, depending upon how expensive the project is versus how much it would cost you to buy the electricity that you would not have to produce had you done the solar project.
But you said some projects have been done, so there has to be...
3. I've done 3 residential projects since, well, for as long as I've been doing this job, since 2009.
Because as the mayor just said, I keep always hearing that there's always this wall there because of rates. And what would be the dollar amount then that would be needed? Because this is important, I think, to customers, because many people in town looking at solar now, they see what costs are, and electric rates, fluctuate and do go up. So how close are we, or what is the magic number that you need to save to make it worthwhile? And because you see all these advertisements, say for Solar City, that's a big one in this area, and they're doing them in many other towns. I think they even did at the Meriden Airport there, or the dump over there in Meriden, which is partly in Wallingford. They have an array of solar panels there. And so it must have been beneficial for them. How close are we?
Again, it depends on the project. Now, Solar City uses a different financial model for these projects. I call it the rent-a-roof model. They own the panels. They get the advantage of the solar energy that's generated, and the customer signs a long-term contract that guarantees them a particular electric rate that would be less than what they're currently paying, and it locks it in for a long period, 20 years, 15, 20, 25 years, I'm not sure exactly. Solar City maintains the advantage of owning the equipment, getting all the federal incentives that are available, and also depreciating the equipment as a business expense. So the advantage of the system really goes to Solar City. The customer gets an advantage in that their electric rate is guaranteed for a long period of time. I don't incent those projects because I'm not here to incent a vendor that doesn't reside in Wallingford. I'm here to incent Wallingford customers and help them save money on energy. So there is no incentive for that type of project. What there is an incentive for is if the customer buys the panels and owns them once they're installed. That's the project that I incent.
Okay, so what you're saying is, and I just use Solar City because they're the big boys out there in the market. I know there's other players. So you're saying it's a choice of Wallingford not to incentivize that particular plan because technically the town or the owner doesn't own them, even though he's seeing reduced rates and lower, in a greener footprint,
Correct.
which is good for all of us.
Right, but any vendor and any customer in town can install solar equipment. I only offer incentives, or I don't offer incentives, but anyone can do a solar project in town anytime.
But
there's nothing to stop anyone from doing a solar project.
no, I understand that, but what I'm saying is to get incentivized, the incentives, so it's a choice of Wallingford Electric not to offer the incentives to that vendor, we won't even mention it by name, but that vendor, because they don't own it, even though it would be greener and less expensive for the people in Wallingford in the long run.
Right, because the incentive would go to the contractor, not to the customer.
But if it's reducing the
You're
rate,
making an assumption that the electric rate would be lower than ours,
No.
and I don't think that's correct.
well, but
It probably is an electric rate that they would still have to be paying that would be higher than ours.
it's something that we should I didn't realize that was the reason. It's something that we should look at because just the greener aspect of it, even if it's equal, the greener aspect is still more beneficial to the earth than it is to burn fossil fuels. It's greener to have solar. And as we're seeing global warming, these are things that need to be done. And if the town can do it and make it a better place to live, that's what we should be doing. Thank you.
Well, as it becomes more cost-effective, there is apt to be more, but there will be done. And that's really the key. The mayor mentioned it as well as Ms. Emmons. There needs to be a reasonable payback, and there are certain parameters under which we have to operate with regard to that, and we're not really subsidizing a business to go ahead and do it. As far as a contractor, we're taking care of our customers who happen to be our owners, and those are the ones that we are focusing on.
Mr. Morgenstein?
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. I want to follow up on this a little bit. We talk about market rates, and of course, financially, that's a big consideration. But there's other factors in terms of cost. With cleaner energy, there's the cost of environment. Mr. Gross talked about greener footprints. We do pay a cost. We pay a cost in terms of health. We pay the cost in terms of the degradation of our waterways, our air. So the thing is that while monetarily the rate may not be market, we might be cheaper, there are other considerations of cost to people's health, people's quality of life. You may not get to that point just yet, but there are considerations that are also financial in a different way in terms of doing that measurement of what is comparable and what is measurable. And I think that should also be factored into that. That you just can't do monetary looking at market and that we're cheaper, because there are other costs. And I think that's important to factor in. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Mr. Gross.
Quick then, on Bob Gross, Long Hill Road, through the chair to the PUC, then who makes this determination? It's the PUC makes this determination of who gets these dollars? Or is it, does the council, or is there an oversight, or oversight committee on yours that makes this decision? Or can you, if you wanted to, can you say that we won't name the company, whatever companies does the solar, does the project, even if it's a smidgen cheaper in the long run, without the carbon footprint, can you do that if you wanted to, because it is a conservation savings?
A project is inspected by an, let's just talk residential. A project is inspected by an engineer, and the site is evaluated. There's certain factors that are taken into consideration. The angle of the roof, the direction the panels face, the angle of the panels themselves, if there's shade issues around the house. And that determines whether they get 100% of that incentive, the maximum being about $5,100 right now, or less. And again, it's based on the efficiency of the project. It's to ensure that we're making these projects as efficient as possible and that we're spending the money on the most efficient projects. I mean, the funding, like everybody's funding, is limited. And so we want to make sure we spend them on the projects that give us the best payback in terms of energy efficiency, savings, and as you indicate, if it's more efficient, then it's also more helpful to the environment, which is also a goal of all of these programs. In terms of how the money is allocated, the Public Utility Commission, I and my management go to the Public Utility Commission with what we have available originally when we left CMEC, and they together came up with the way that the money would be spent. We had some funding that came from CMEC that was from one source. We earmarked that for renewables. The RGGI money was decided that it was best to dedicate that to residential, and the energy conservation and load management money that comes from the customer bill is split between residential and then the commercial industrial class, adding up to about a 60-40 split, as I indicated earlier. So that was a decision made by the Public Utility Commission based upon our recommendations.
So it's the PUC's commission decisions on where the money can go or not.
It would be by the commission as to what our policy is with respect to this, Bob.
So it's potentially could change. I just hope that, I don't know who has oversight over the PUC. I don't know if it's the mayor. Well, you guys do, I think, at some point, because you can approve or disapprove their budget. I would just hope that there's more renewables besides the LED bulbs, bigger projects. Do they do hydrothermal? Do they allow all these types of things? Well, Mr. Letourneau, I'm just saying because these are ways of making a greener footprint, which is going to be, look what's happening in Canada right now. That's not by chance. That's by global warming. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? There being none, I bring it back to the council. There is a motion on the table. Please call the roll.
Fishbein.
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Excuse me. Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for educating the public about your programs.
Gentlemen, thank you.
On to item 7, which is to conduct a public hearing and consider an act on the ordinance appropriating $3,300,000 for school system capital improvement program Phase 2 and authorizing the issue of $3,300,000 of the bonds. I hereby convene the public hearing for the $3,300,000 appropriation and bond authorization for the school system capital improvement program Phase 2. The ordinance, which is the subject of this public hearing, is available to the public and may be obtained at this meeting from the town clerk. Is there a motion and a second to read the title of the proposed ordinance and to waive the reading of the remainder of the ordinance, incorporating its full text into the minutes of this meeting?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Did you get that? Madam Clerk, would you please? Did you laugh in Shortell?
I got it, thank you.
Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Sullivan, Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Yes, it does. An ordinance appropriating $3,300,000 for school system capital improvement program Phase 2 and authorizing the issue of $3,300,000 bonds of the town to meet said appropriation and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. Are there any comments from the public? Going once, going twice. Oh, Mr. Gross. You were way in my peripheral vision.
Yes, I was. I noticed this $3 million and so forth. Is this really going to be bonded?
Yes, probably, yeah. Yes, it will be up
Okay,
into
don't
the...
throw the probably in there.
No, I didn't mean probably, up to the extent that we spend. If we spend
understand.
3.2, we'll bond 3.2, yes.
If you spend 2.8 or whatever, because if a bid comes back too high or something.
Correct.
I would just hope that the Board of Ed comes back for more money to start bonding now, because historically low rates, the Fed is going to be starting moving on rates.
Well, these are objects that the schools think that they can finish in a certain period of time, especially when they have the advantage of having the schools closed. So we're chunking these into phases. So this would be Phase 2.
Okay, I just hope they keep coming, because they need to get them done, and rates are low, and the lower the rates are for them, the lower the rates that we have to pay back.
Well, I agree, but we can't sell bonds and not match it with the cash outflow of the project. That's illegal.
I understand.
Which I think
Oh,
we've
I
had the
understand that.
discussion
No, I
before,
understand,
so
but I just hope
you
they...
know that.
One at a time, please.
I would hope they would do more. I would hope that everything gets done that needs to get done now, instead of waiting 5 years and the rates might be 5% or 6%. So
We're trying.
Well, I hope they try harder, and hope the mayor goes for additional bonding. Thank you.
We're trying.
Any other comments from the public? There being none, I close the public hearing. Is there a motion and a second that the proposed ordinance appropriating $3,300,000 for the school system capital improvement program Phase 2 and bond authorization be adopted?
Yes, so moved.
Moved and seconded.
I seconded that, Town Clerk.
Virtually
Excitedly.
concurrently.
Will the record show excitedly?
All right. It's council time. Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Fishbein.
How does this affect anybody's budget? I mean, what's the budgetary effect and where?
Well, the budgetary effect will be shown when we issue the bonds, not when we issue them, but when we start repaying them. So it's going to really depend on when we borrow, when we sell the bonds. If we borrow in the fall of this year, this calendar year, we'll have a 6-month interest payment in next spring. If we can make it to the winter time, let's say January of 2017, our payments won't start till the fiscal 17-18 budget. And that's where you see it in the debt service line items, principal and interest retirements.
So, and not looking for an actual number, but estimation, the 6-month payment, you said might happen in the fall, 2016. About how much would that be?
Well, that would be on the short term, and if we, This would be $3 million if we packed another couple of items with that bond issue. Let's say we issued $8 million in bonds. That interest payment would probably be somewhere in the area of maybe $40,000 to $50,000, depending on what the rates when they come in.
So am I to understand that the budget that was just passed already has a fudge factor in it for this in it?
I don't really like the term fudge factor, but
well,
in the new, I hope you don't take
There's
umbrage
money
at
that-
my-
let me
Yes,
clar-
if I may I change your question with your permission?
Absolutely.
Okay. If you're asking if there's money to make that 6-month installment payment, it is in the line item that we call new debt service. Yes, there is money in there.
So if this item was to fail and you didn't have authorization for the bonding, there's already
That's correct.
extra money that's been budgeted in the budget that was just approved that,
I had to protect us in case we do go out in the fall. That's correct.
okay. And I guess the reason why somebody votes no on your budgets. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Letourneau.
Jim, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, going out in the fall, but these are construction-ready projects now.
That's correct.
So why would we bond in the fall for something that the project is going to get done basically when school ends?
We try to get as close to the end of the construction of a project, whether it's a school project or a non-school project, and then bond. These are items that are probably quick hits that we would bond probably when they're done or close to being done, because this way it makes sure we don't overbond and then have to pay interest back on items that we did not need.
So these are, I'm looking at the list here, and it's anticipated, I mean, all of these should be done this summer.
I believe they would, and if that is the case, then we'll probably, at that point, John, it's like, or Councilman John, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. We know exactly, or have a pretty good idea of what we're going to bond. That's correct.
Okay.
What you try to do with a bond issue is I try to time the cash outflow with the bond sale, so that when we know how much we've outlaid, then that's how much we sell for. That's pretty much evening it off as close as we can come. Because we are usually in a pretty good cash position to outlay that cash first, and then basically replenish the bonds, replenish our cash, and also record a revenue in that capital projects fund, the $3 million, let's say $3.3 million, if it all gets spent. We would need, or else there would be a huge deficit there. So it's a cash issue, but it's also an issue with regards to the recognition of revenue in the financial statements of the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, that's the management of the assets by the finance department. They've got to have enough money to be paying payroll on a regular basis, making other types of payments. That's all cash. They are advancing cash in order to have a project move forward. At the point it's practically finished, is what Jim was saying, then they're looking to bond and replenish. But that's all of that management issue, which is complicated, and it requires constant attention.
And just as maybe a different perspective, you remember the 11th School Renovation Project, very long period of construction time. I think we issued bonds 4 times for that. I think I did alone, and I think my predecessor might have done 1 bond issue for that. So we either issued bonds 4 or 5 times as those construction projects were going on, because if we outlaid over, let's say, 2 or 3 months or 4 months, we were bleeding cash big time. And then the council at the time threw the library renovation at me when I came, and that was basically completed over 2, I'd call it 2 construction cycles. So we really had a really big cliff there. And I think I bonded the library over 2 separate issues over the period of maybe 14 months or 16 months or something like that. So it really depends on the number of the cash outlay that's going out the door. This is not huge, but the $72 million school projects, those were we were spending cash, and therefore we had to borrow a lot more frequently.
You all set? Yeah, I'm all set. Any other questions for the council? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein,
Yes.
Laffin,
Yes.
Letourneau,
Yes.
Marone,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Sullivan, Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Ordinance passes.
Yes, it does. Thank you. At this time, we will take up the addendum, which is to conduct a public hearing at, and consider an act on the sale of 188 North Cherry Street. Attorney Fishbein, before I go to the public, I think it'd be beneficial if we heard your proposal.
Thank you, and thank you for taking us at this time. Members of the council, I have... Oh, okay.
Before you do that, I think we just want to note a recusal.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that I have a conflict as determined in the past by the Ethics Commission, but in the interest of the abundance of caution, I am recusing myself from this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Fishbein, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Norman Fishbein. I represent Mr. Masella and his wife, who are the trustees of the Masella 2003 Family Trust. I do not represent the other purchaser under this agreement, Tunde Kovacs. She's represented by Gerald Farrell Jr., who could not be here tonight, but I have written authority from her to appear tonight and present her position to the council. I have several copies.
Thanks. Thank you.
This is a matter that came before the council several months ago, and there was a proposal that was made to have my client purchase the property at 188 North Cherry Street. At that time, Ms. Kovacs presented herself and had expressed an interest in being a co-owner because the Masella property abuts this on one side and the Kovacs property abuts it on the other. Subsequent to that meeting, the parties got together with their respective attorneys, and we've come up with an agreement in which we're offering to purchase from the town of Wallingford the property at 188 North Cherry Street for the sum total price of $13,000. Because there will be an unequal distribution of the property, it'll be cut into two portions when it finally happens. The price is going to be a portion between the parties, and there'll be a survey which will be prepared subsequent to any approval that's rendered tonight, so that we'll have a map to go by. So this is a copy for the council as to what the agreement is between the parties, and we're asking that it be approved if you see fit tonight.
Thank you. And as some of us may recall, several months ago, Attorney Fishbein and his client were here before us, and a motion was made that night to empower me to negotiate with Attorney Fishbein. When Attorney Fishbein came within the range of what we looked at as appraisals, I think the discussion, that resulted in the discussion coming back to the council. So with that, I will open up the public hearing for public comment and discussion. Is there any? Mr. Morgenstein?
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. I just want to see if I could get my memory correct on this. This is a town piece of property that was not maintained, which then brought together the homeowners abutting it to think that the solution to this was to purchase it because it was a mess, town-owned property. Is that correct?
That's correct, except when you say owners, it was one owner, my client, who had the issue, and then Ms. Kovacs, who's the other abutting owner, became part of the discussion.
And if I retain my memory correctly, the town still will have right-of-way because there's electric division property or things on it.
The law department will see to it that
Yes.
those easements remain on
Yeah,
the property.
we have already verbally expressed the fact, and it would be in the contract, that because there is an electrical station of some sort there, that there would be a perpetual easement that would allow the town to have access to that 24 hours a day.
I guess my comment is that I find it kind of sad and kind of shameful that the town is going to end up profiting from lack of maintenance because this is the remedy that the abutting property owners felt they needed to take. I just find this disturbing because of our lack of maintenance that will profit by this.
Mr. Chairman, just to keep the record straight, my information is that one of the property owners was regularly mowing the property.
Thank you, Mayor.
So Bob Gross.
Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. And that, if that's the case, if they were maintaining the property, was the town paying them to make, they should have been. I mean, if they were keeping, I mean, this is, I agree with Mr. Morgenstein, this is a shame that the town is charging them this sum of money to just maintain property, to keep an easement on it. I think that if the people want to buy the property, it should be at a very reduced value. I guess you can't build on it or anything of that nature. They're just doing this to keep their neighborhood clean. Again, I'm just going to echo Mr. Morgenstein. It's just a shame that the town can't keep a small piece of property clean for the neighborhood. It just takes down the values. It's a very, I'm not against this, but I'm just saying it's a shame that the town can't keep up property. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? There being none, I will close the public hearing and I will bring it back to the council for discussion and/or motions. Attorney Farrell, in terms of proceeding forward, would it be appropriate for us to consider a motion to authorize the law department to negotiate the sale upon the terms presented to us?
That would be appropriate, and I'd like to state on the record that I've stayed away from this project because Mrs. Kovach is, in fact, a long-standing client of my office.
And I'd just like to state that most of my discussions have been with Janice Small in the town attorney's office because of the situation.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying all that and keeping it out in the open.
Mr. Chairman, I move we authorize the law department to negotiate the sale of this property with the terms as presented to us.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the council?
Just, do you mean for them to execute, complete the transaction, or just negotiate?
My thought was that the contract would come back before us.
Okay.
And I think that's what the motion would support. Okay.
As a point of interest, once a contract is signed and the map is prepared, at that point, would we need any further hearings or votes?
I don't.
Or will there be an authorization for the mayor to execute the document to transfer title in conformity with the contract?
Attorney Fishbein, what I've seen in these instances is that the council is presented with the contract, and then we authorize the mayor to sign it and to close on the deal.
So we would not have to appear again, probably.
I wouldn't foresee that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council, questions? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Laffin.
Yes.
I apologize. Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa. Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you, and thank you for taking us out of order.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to you. On to item 8.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve waiving the bid and approval of a 5-year lease agreement between the Board of Education and Ichiban Properties, LLC for 100 South Turnpike Road.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we have representatives from the Board of Education? Denial aside, please come visit with us and share the experience. And remind us who you are for the record.
I don't know.
You can,
Roxanne McKay, Board Chair.
Sal Menzo, Superintendent.
So we have a lease in front of us.
Yes, you do. As you may recall, January 4th, we had the unfortunate circumstances of returning from winter break to no building that was inhabitable at that time. We had a flood that had occurred on the second floor bathroom, and it had water had found itself to the basement through the elevator, damaging several elements of the building, the electrical, all of the plumbing had to be replaced because there were some issues there, as well as IT, flooring, walls. So we have been displaced since January 4th, during which time we spent a month at Lyman Hall Ag Science Center in the main office. Predominantly, the only confidential space we had were our cars. So we were driving around making confidential phone calls around town. And as of February, we moved to a temporary location on 100 South Turnpike, where we have been since. We've found that that location is much more advantageous to our needs. During the past several months, or the past month and a half, I should say, we've been approached by the landlord of 100 South Turnpike to begin conversations of trying just to make us a permanent resident at that location. In consultation with the legal department, specifically Janice Small, we worked with that particular owner to pursue opportunities because we still had 2 years of a lease at Hall Avenue. He indicated that in our present lease at Hall Avenue, there was an opportunity for us to sublet. We did not want to get into a subletting agreement. So I negotiated back with him the fact that we would be happy to engage in conversations about 100 South Turnpike, but we couldn't have 2 leases, and we certainly couldn't afford 2 leases. We went back and forth, much with the help of Janice, and it was determined that they were willing to submit a lease, sever our lease with our original landlord of Hall Avenue. The landlord of Hall Avenue was willing to accept that, so we have no legal binding. Our lease would be severed if we accepted this lease, and the person who owns 100 South Turnpike would take on our lease for the remaining 2 years of our contract with Hall Avenue at no additional cost to the Board of Education. In the meantime, we were discussing the price of 100 South Turnpike, working with Shelby Jackson in the assessor's office. We're very pleased at the price because it's below market value compared to what other properties. It's a gross lease, square footage. It's not a net. Usually you pay your taxes and your utility and such. That's all included. So it's the $10 a square foot, no escalator the first 2 years, a 2% escalator the following year. That was very fortunate for us too, because in talking with the assessor's office, usually escalators occur each year of the contract, which is presently in our contract at Hall Avenue. The only difference, it is more square footage, so there is an additional cost to the board, which the board has already approved and is accommodated in its present budget that was recently approved by the town council. We see this as an advantageous space because it is one floor, totally ADA compliant. I don't remember a time when we were in our previous building where the elevator was not an issue, which caused challenges for our public to enter our meetings on the 3rd floor, as well as parents and students who might have disabilities. This space also allows us to, in the event that we need to offer any large-scale conferences, we do have a larger space, which we've done. We've been able to unify programs which we have not been able to do in the past with teacher professional development, and in some instances we've had to hold it over several days, which is more expensive for substitutes. We've been able to pull everybody together on single days, which then costs us less money. So we're here tonight. Janice has gone through, she's really the shepherd of the process with this lease. She's gone through this. We agree from a Board of Ed standpoint with the terms, and we're here tonight just to seek your approval.
Thank you.
Sorry for that long story, but
No, it
Actually,
was,
it's pretty abbreviated when you consider it's been going on for 5 months.
We just would like real telephones and not cell phones, because we've
Literally.
trying to maintain a low cost to the town through this process, assuming that no matter where we went, we were going to have additional costs. We've been maintaining cell phones. We've been using old-fashioned Nextels or our personal cell phones to make all calls. We have low-speed internet, but at least we do have Wi-Fi, but it's not necessarily to the standard that we need to function on a daily basis. And we don't have any of our furniture. Our furniture, which will be moved through the insurance expenses, because we haven't exhausted our insurance expenses, that'll pay for our move back to, if we were to stay at 100 South Turnpike. We've been working very closely with Kurt Schreiber to ensure that we didn't compromise our insurance opportunities to leverage those. So we've been just using folding tables, folding chairs, since February 1st.
the abundance of caution has been exercised, it appears.
We're trying our best.
Yep.
We believe in monitoring the dollars.
Good job. All right, questions from the council? Attorney Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like the council to be aware of that Assistant Town Attorney Jeffrey Einhorn had significant involvement in assisting Attorney Small on this, and his private law practice deals significantly in real estate. So he was a big help to Attorney Small on this.
Absolutely. Both. We could not, with this whole process, I have to say, beyond the lease, the law department has been phenomenal, and I think Roxanne could attest to that. I say that every moment I get a chance, whenever I see Janice or Jeff out, they helped us through this process, as well as Kurt through risk management, because it was
A
a
unique
significant
experience on many levels.
And we did not experience a single grievance through the process. We have people living out of boxes right now for 3 months, which you're doing all your payroll. all
You
your
mean
insurance.
working out of boxes?
Living. I call it living because I'd never go home. So,
okay. Well, with that, I think I saw Councilor Marone's hand. Oh, I'm sorry, I confused your hand with Councilor Fishbine's. Councilor Fishbine.
Joe's got little hands. But anyway.
Oh, boy.
I'm just looking at
let's not go to that debate.
Well, Councilor Laffin will read into that one too, but I'm just looking at the budgetary impact on, when you walked into the budget this year and you said we need housing, you budgeted an amount. And what I heard during your presentation was that this is more square footage than you previously had, and therefore implying that this is a higher amount.
Correct.
So what's the budgetary difference?
The difference right now is a little over $40,000. The fact is that we already, and we discussed this as a board because we knew we didn't want to, based on the board's guiding principles of reducing our budget this year to meet the mayor's allocation. We didn't want to touch programming for students. We wanted to keep the cuts as far from the classroom as possible. In that process, I was very clear to the board that I felt this location was important to us as a school and as a system, and therefore we did make reductions such as an administrative assistant to myself who's retiring. We're not replacing that position. We also made reductions in terms of some other resources that are well removed from students. In the process, we needed to cut $404,000 approximately to make the mayor's budget number. We actually found a little over $500,000 worth of efficiencies, which would accommodate this opportunity, as well as we're also going to accommodate expanding the middle school arts program, the alternative middle school program, which was one of our priorities. So over the course of the time that you passed the budget and just last week, we have surveyed staff on efficiencies. We had about 33% response rate from the survey. They had less than 48 hours to fill it out. And we collated all that data, and we were able to come forward with the appropriate expenditures, or reductions rather. So we feel comfortable based on those reductions that this could be accommodated appropriately in this year's budget.
So I guess the cynic in me has to ask why, if you were able between the budget being passed and last night to do an efficiency study and therefore
we had already
reduce
done it.
expenditures.
We had already done it once, but the challenge was that these are much closer to the bone. These are things that we had looked at potentially in year 2 or year 3 in our strategic planning process. We didn't want to do any of these. We were cutting a math curriculum resource teacher. That's not something that you ever want to do. But we're trying to look at, like the mayor often does, look at positions that were going to be open due to attrition or due to retirements. So therefore, that's where we started. But in many cases, we are going to be redistributing a lot of responsibilities, including to myself. But we, again, made a commitment to the Board of Education. In difficult times, you have to make difficult decisions. And we weren't going to make those decisions to impact students. So our choice was to cut teachers in classrooms. We had to reach that number. There wasn't where we could come up with it any other way. So we removed other resources. We looked at our adult education program closer. We looked at a variety of different resources, again, trying to move it away from the students as far as possible.
But was that initiative undertaken because of this $40,000 increase in expenditures, or?
No, because of the mayor's reduction.
I think it's the total process. I mean, I think, Craig, if I understand your question correctly, this was identified as a priority, if I may say, that this was a priority for our central office staff. So it was part of the process to consider what are viable cuts and what are realistic places for us to cut, and what are our priorities. So this was ranked as an important priority to make this move for the central office staff and all that encompass it.
No, I understand that, because right now you have them. I mean, my understanding is that we close out this year, you're going to have like a $1.5 million surplus or something like that. And so obviously you have the money for the $40,000 into next year, because I don't foresee you getting a reduction, which I think state statute would not allow for anyway. So, I mean, you have the money to do this, and that's why I was just looking at the budgetary impact. So, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at this with a 5-year lease, is there, I don't see it in here, is there an option?
There is an extension at the end of the 5 year. It's a 5-year option, 5 years, and with an option at 5 years.
Okay.
We would not go beyond 5 years. That was something that the Board of Education and the town attorneys.
Right, I was just curious on the option, because usually, you know, on long-term leases, you try to get some sort of an option. I'm sure this is going to get passed tonight, but you know, we won't talk about it again until 5 years is up.
Right.
But I was just curious, long-term planning, you know, we're at, what you're going to be spending over 5 years is probably close to $58,000-$59,000 over 5 years for this, to lease this property. Any thoughts long-term to possibly taking one of the schools, one of the high school's properties, and putting up a separate building for your needs?
We actually have in our, as part of our process that I explained to Mr. Fishbein, we have in our midterm efficiencies a buildings and space review that we'd like to coordinate with the town through the POCD, because that was a recommendation. So that will be something that we'll be discussing next year with the board to look at space. We have done an analysis of the space right now, and unfortunately it's clustered, a couple classrooms in each, but there is an opportunity, especially with potentially Sheehan or even in some areas of other schools, that we do have the space that we could put in a freestanding building. The thing is that we want to just, again, do the clear analysis, which I know you would all expect.
Sure.
And we feel that that would have a lot of benefit in a variety of ways for the school district.
Good. That's basically what I was after, is the planning now, not 5 years from now, and, oh, by golly, we've got to go lease for another 5 years.
John,
Now-
you should know that about Dr. Menzo. He's
So
a planner.
The other concern
I want to bring this out for the folks that.
Yeah, no,
I
I
appreciate
appreciate it. The other thing that's on that potentially, and I don't mean to borrow problems that we don't have today that might be here tomorrow, but the fact is we have the train station obviously moving, and then it's going to be coming, I'm assuming, under town, total town control, at which time we still have adult education in that building, and it is not up to code. So I'm not certain, and I don't want to project what our responsibilities will be. But in the event there are responsibilities, this building offers us the swing space in a safe location outside of our schools to still conduct the adult education classes that occur during the day in this building. So we wouldn't have to, if we had to make modifications in order to do something at train station, we wouldn't have to look for additional space at that time to lease. This would be able to be assumed in this building.
Okay. I just wanted to, bring forward the planning of this. So
Thank you.
It just doesn't evaporate after 5 years and we talk about it again.
No, we would like to actually bring some of the efficiency measures that we're trying to take and share those with the town council prior to the budget process, and maybe work collaboratively with the town council to do some of those activities.
Thank you.
I heard the number of 50,000.
No, that was, yeah.
It's a lot more than that.
Correct.
Yeah, over the term, it would be $744,000.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wanted to correct that too before.
It's the first year is 130,000. The last year of the lease is $149,000.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I only added up per month.
You scared me. I was like, wait a minute,
I wish it worked that
How much
way,
are we
though.
downsizing? I already have files in my trunk, but.
I'm sorry, thank you for catching that.
It's all right. I just didn't want to leave here
mislead anyone.
misinformed.
Right.
Exactly.
Any other comments from the council other than correcting math? Councilor Zandri?
I just have maybe a clarifying question onto what Councilor Letourneau was speaking of. If the Board of Ed ever wanted to make a decision to buy or build on school grounds, I mean, the town owns those buildings. The town, I would make the assumption, would build it, but you might bring the request forward with some interest, the board.
Correct. And we would have to look at reimbursements because in a previous district of mine, the district looked to build a separate building for administrative offices, and the reimbursement, if there is still any, is very slight. So the most of that would be coming from total taxpayer dollars.
Right. I mean, and just a real base comparison I did with some construction costs that I had available at 13,000 square feet, at $200 a square feet construction, based on an idea that we already have the property. And this has nothing to do with the logistics inside the building. You're looking at almost $3 million.
Correct.
So it's not over a 20 or 30-year term, we might be able to get some savings out of it, but there's a big initial upfront cost. So it's definitely something that would have to be reviewed. This is a good 5-year deal opportunity to get in on this lease, and if it's something down the road, we can always look at it. But it's not as simple as, well, we've got land, we can just build on it. It's not as simple as that.
Yeah, no, and I don't think that was what Mr. Letourneau.
No, I'm just thinking out loud for people that might be watching at home. Well, why, after we mentioned the more correct math, then it does sound close. Well, gee, over 5 years, we're, another 10 years on top of that, you've almost paid for a building, but it's just not, it's not apples to apples. So I just want to kind of
as you
clarify.
point out, Jason, for a 13,000 square foot, building, to have a footprint that's available,
Right.
even for that.
It's not that
I mean,
simple.
again, the advantage of this is it's 100% handicapped accessible. So it's all first floor. It's got some pluses for us right now.
No,
Do you have a
it
full
definitely
attic?
looks,
Yeah.
it looks solid to me. I just wanted to add that. That's all. Thank you,
That's
Mr.
not
Chairman.
included in the square footage. We're not paying for the attic, which can be transformed.
Right. Any other questions or comments from the council? Questions or comments from Mr. Gross?
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road, on a roll tonight because it's downhill. Just for a question just for the council again, and for the Board of Ed. There was a building across the street. You're spending, and the $750, does that include all your utilities? Everything's covered? Or is this just the rent?
But the 750 is over the 5 years.
I understand that.
Yeah, we still pay utilities.
Okay. So I'm just saying, when the town's looking for things, and I understand the building might not have been a fit or would have been a fit, that building was for sale for a long time across the street. I think it was brought up before the town could have had a use for it. I don't know of the Board of Ed, but there's always ways you can configure buildings. The town could have purchased it, 50 additional parking spaces. I think the town council or the mayor, I don't know who does these things, really needs to look outside the box, and try and, because that building went for a little over $800,000 it sold for. and that's a one-time cost. And it would have provided additional downtown parking, which is always an issue, and I just think the town really needs to plan or look at some of these things, new council, newer ideas, younger ideas. Maybe some of these things will come to the forefront in the future. Maybe the mayor will agree to some of these things. I mean, it's just because we're going to spend over 10 years, $1.5 million on this property, plus costs, or more. And we could have had that building, reconfigured it for less, and own the property and have parking downtown. Those are your dollars, Mayor, that we could save in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? There being none, I bring it back to the council. There's a motion on the table. Oh, Councilor Fishbein.
I just wanted to get my 2 cents in. I totally agree on the 50 South Main Street property. I had my eye on that for a long time. As a parking lot on South Main Street and on Center Street would have been perfect to add to our parking in the downtown. And, you know, we don't sit in the chair of making those decisions. Ultimately, we do when something comes to us. And I think it's an absolute shame that that property didn't end up in our hands. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa.
I would, just based on my colleagues' comments, I would disagree to the extent we do have a say. And if any one of us ever was interested in pursuing a property, we could bring it forward. Obviously, we don't individually negotiate it, but usually they start with the administration. But, you know, you want to buy something, you could bring it up and we could discuss it and talk about it and ask the administration to look into it. Because we're the one, they can't buy it without us, right? Approving it anyway. I think when that property was on the market, I know my colleague, Councilor Zandri, had expressed an interest in it, but I thought at the time it didn't appear that the town potentially had a use for it. But, you know, I'm agreeing with you. If this was thought about, maybe we could have looked into it on our own and decided to pursue it.
Thank you. No, that building is not before us.
Yeah,
it's not the issue before us. So, Councilor Marone.
So at the threat of dragging out that line of questioning, Mr. Chairman, you know, so we had a situation where we leased a building, and then there was a flood, and now you were able to walk away from the building because it was a lease. So if we owned the building, then we would own it, we'd collect the insurance, we'd have to rebuild it, we'd have to find temporary space, et cetera, et cetera. No one in the private sector is building buildings or buying buildings or wanting real estate, quite frankly. Most big corporations, you know, lease and make arrangements because then you have flexibility. You know, as the school district grows and shrinks, then you can get in and out of a building. So I don't think that we should be looking at buying anything. I think I think this is a great arrangement the way we have it. I think that the administration and Dr. Menzo did a great job at, you know, taking a bad situation and turning it into something positive. The old building was inadequate in terms of square footage. The elevator didn't work. You know, there was ADA issues. So I think that this is the ideal situation that we have right here, is that you had a lease, you were able to walk away from it in a bad situation, and now you're getting another lease. So, you know, I think we talk about buying buildings because then we own them, but then they also come off the tax rolls, and then, you know, you're saddled with the maintenance. So, you know, it's a one-time cost, but it's not a one-time cost because then, you know, roofs fail and heating systems need to be replaced and so on and so forth, and it'd be just other costs that we could potentially walk away from in the future. So I think that this is a chance where you want to model what the private sector does, and you don't want to own buildings. I think we have too many buildings as it is, and I think that it becomes a burden on the taxpayers.
Very well said. There's no other comment from the council. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein.
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Marone.
Yes.
Shortell.
Of course.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri.
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes. Thank you.
Motion passes.
You've made us so happy.
Thank you,
I'll
gentlemen.
finally have a home.
With
Yes.
that, I think we have media to set up for the next portion of our agenda, so I'm going to call a brief recess. Call the meeting back to order. On to Agenda Item 9, which is the review of the Plan of Conservation and Development by the Town Council in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-23. Before we dive into this, Attorney Farrell, could you remind us of our options for the evening? I don't think we are going to hold the public hearing because that has already been scheduled. I believe Planning and Zoning is doing that. Is that correct? Yep.
You're not precluded from having your own public hearing.
Understood.
It's an option that's available to you, but again, you're not required either way, even if Planning and Zoning was not having a public hearing. Your role is to endorse or reject the entire plan or part of it, and you may offer comments and recommendations.
Thank you. With that, if we could, it looks like we have media in the form of a presentation, and if you could let us know who you are for the record, we would be grateful.
Thank you. I will be brief. I'm Rebecca Auger. I'm a principal planner with Mylone and McBroom, the consulting firm that was hired to assist the Planning and Zoning Commission in updating your plan of conservation and development.
I'm Casey Costello, town planner.
And again, as Attorney Farrell just said, we're here tonight because the Planning and Zoning Commission has formally referred the draft plan to you for your review, and they have a public hearing scheduled for June 6th. It is ultimately the Planning and Zoning Commission's document to adopt. So tonight, I'm just going to go really quickly through the planning process that has been going on for just over a year now, and highlight some of the top recommendations that have come out in the plan. You have had the plan, I think it was referred to you in mid-March or so, so you have an opportunity to review the document yourselves. I'm not going to dwell on it as it is long, so I'm here really to entertain questions that you may have. But again, the process has been about a year. The steering committee that was formed is representative of several boards and commissions, including the town council. You had 2 representatives on the steering committee. And they kicked off in last April. The months of April and May were really time for us as consultants to do some data updates and gather information. We launched a community survey that was had impressive results of over 1,800 responses in early June of last year. That was really intended to help identify issues and concerns in the community, and it was helpful in that respect. Through the month of June, the steering committee and ourselves held several focus group sessions where we invited parties, agencies, boards, commissions, other groups that have particular interests in the community to help us flesh out information, update data, and identify areas of concern and actions for moving forward. Last summer, the steering committee had divided itself into subcommittees. We held several meetings throughout the summer to, again, flesh out areas of concern and ideas for action strategies and goals moving forward. Last fall, we conducted a public workshop, and then we began to shift our focus to the town center, as that was a priority area for this plan update. We had another town survey that was focused on the center, and we had almost 400 responses to that survey. Also very happy with those results. And we conducted a town center workshop in conjunction with the consultant that was working on your transit-oriented development plan, as the town center and that TOD area are inextricably linked. And then we spent really the holiday period drafting the document itself. The steering committee reviewed it in January, February, and sent it on to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who reviewed it again, and they have since referred it to you. So through the course of the planning process, we had several opportunities for public outreach. We engaged the community in as many ways as we could, and having a very representative steering committee helped in that process, where you had representation from several boards and commissions active in the community. The thrust of the document itself, compared to your current plan of conservation and development, was really to develop something that's reader-friendly and usable by yourselves and your boards and commissions and administration and departments. And the emphasis was on implementation. The steering committee was very emphatic in their insistence that this be a plan that could be implemented and that does get implemented. So if you do look at the document, when you look through it, it is set up in a non-data heavy list narrative kind of format, which is how I would classify your current plan. It's really set up to tell the story of where we are now, where we want to go, how we're going to get there, and who's going to lead the effort to get us there. This is a policy guidance document. Nothing in here is binding, but this is what the community has set forth as the vision for Wallingford over the next 10 years and the strategies to help you get there. And again, this is a required document by the state, and there are several elements that need to be included in the plan itself, and they are all included. So just to touch on some of the priority recommendations, the number one priority, again, was on implementing this plan. There was a sentiment that many of the ideas from the last plan just were not implemented strongly enough. So the top recommendation is to establish a plan implementation committee that is representative of the boards and commissions that really hold the responsibility to implement the plan. And you can see them all listed on the screen before you. The idea is that these individual boards, commissions, agencies would determine who is representing them on this plan implementation committee, and that the committee's charge really is to monitor progress in implementation, address any changes that might need to be made in the goals or strategies identified, because the plan is intended to last for 10 years, and obviously a lot of things change over 10 years. When your last plan was adopted, no one was anticipating the recession. And hold regular meetings and public forums to really try to provide accountability to boards and commissions to be working towards implementing the strategies. There was a lot of focus on the town center in this plan, and so several of the top recommendations are based on that. One of the recommendations is to review town center zoning and create a new district to encourage a little more flexibility and hopefully spark some redevelopment. And it may be looking at the current bounds of the commercial district and expanding them, maybe introducing greater flexibility in uses, coverage, and parking. Developing a town center parking plan was another strongly recommended strategy. There was a general consensus that it's not an issue of quantity, it is rather an issue of quality and accessibility and coordination and just awareness of the parking that does exist, and that there are many ways that the town could go about trying to facilitate some change in this arena, and that it should be done in a comprehensive manner through a parking plan. Implementing the TOD plan, which was going on, that planning process was going on in parallel with the POCD, but that is very important to the future, especially in this 10 years of the town of Wallingford with that new asset coming, to capitalize on that, to again try to spark redevelopment in the town center and TOD area. Other economic development issues looked at the I-5 and I-X areas around the 68 I-91 interchange area and Barnes Industrial Park area. The thought and the information that was looked at is that the zoning regulations may be out of sync with current market demands. These were more intended for sort of office campus style development, which is not in high demand, so that the Planning and Zoning Commission should consider alternatives, potentially consolidating the zones, allowing additional uses, enabling some higher site coverage, and some design standards. There were, again, with an emphasis on the town center, the management of sidewalk maintenance was a priority issue so that the town center sidewalks are addressed on a more regular basis. Exploring mechanisms for catalyzing redevelopment. This comes out of several discussions on economic development, what to do with the town center, the TOD area. There are a variety of ways a town can participate in trying to spark redevelopment These are just some of the ways listed on the screen before you, but the recommendation really is to explore these alternatives and establish criteria for when and why a project may interest the town's participation. What is the benefit, and when are you willing to do that? The Wood and Kaplan site came up as a perennial issue of interest. The recommendation in the plan is to pursue phased redevelopment because we see this area, this site playing a pivotal role in the parking plan. And that if a parking plan determines, coordinated parking in that area, including some of the town-owned property, implement those improvements, and then at that time, reassess the potential for redevelopment on that property. Providing directional signage and gateway entrances to the town center, again, just to vitalize that area. And then I apologize, that appears to be a repeated recommendation. Route 5, also a perennial area of concern. The recommendation is to work with the COG and DOT to pursue improvements, as there have been studies done. There are improvements out there already that have been studied. It's a matter of implementation. Working to find a replacement for the Bristol-Myers Squibb site, also very important, and working to ensure that parking around the new train station does not adversely affect the neighbors. Since the draft plan was referred to you, we have made some edits based on comments as we are in the required 65-day public comment period. So we just oversight neglected to include an existing land use and zoning map. Those are included now. We've done some revisions to the action agenda to again clarify that the implementation committee, the organizations and commissions that are represented, would be determining their own representation rather than appointed. And then we clarified in the action agenda, we use this sustainability symbol because it is a required element of the plan to now address sustainability. So we explain that more clearly. We added supportive agencies to certain goals that were relevant to them. We clarified the utility service area terminology based on comments from your staff, and we clarified some concerns with open spaces. So again, the draft is available on the website right now. The Planning and Zoning Commission has a public hearing scheduled for June 6th. And at this point, I would entertain any questions.
Well, thank you. I will start by saying that I've reviewed the plan, and it is quite an impressive product. Clearly, you and the committee have put a great deal of work into it, and in large part, you've come up with a really comprehensive plan with some good goals. So I'd just like to start by saying that before I turn it over to other councilors for questions. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Rebecca. Going into this project, I mean, Councilor Letourneau and I were on the steering committee. I really came to the table in a cynical Agenda 21 look at things, and I gotta say, I'm very happy. I mean, it's not a perfect document, in my opinion, but I thought the consultants would, be steering us. That's not what happened here at all. I mean, Rebecca and her associate from Malone McBroom listened to us, listened to the public, and even when I had some of my wacky ideas, didn't just laugh me out of the room. So I just thank you. So.
Any other comments from the council? I will say one of the things that does concern me is the implementation committee. I get what you're trying to accomplish with it, and I reviewed the proposed blend of membership, I think the implementation of the plan is up to a variety of groups. I mean, I think planning and zoning has a bunch to do with it. In some instance, zoning board of appeals will have something to do with it. The mayor's office will have something to do with it, and this council will have to do with the implementation of the plan. In addition to that, you know, I think there's going to have to be some stimulation of private development. We can pass the housing zones and downtown districts and TODs and all kinds of three-letter things. If we can't stimulate the interest of the of developers to come in and take advantage of or help us with those things, we're not going to get very far. So I'm not excited about adding another committee to government here in Wallingford. That's the only criticism you're going to hear from me about the plan, because as I initially said, this is a terrific product, great series of goals and objectives, and by and large, I do favor the adoption of it. So,
I'll take it.
Any other comments, questions from the public, other than Councilor Fishbein? No, Councilor Fishbein.
Yeah, I just want to address the implementation committee for probably the 10th time, but we spent $70,000 on this. And the plan that we currently have, which I wasn't involved with, basically sat on a shelf for 10 years. I don't think that's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. Now, while the state tells us we have to do this, we have to have this plan, if you look at the sign that's out at the parade grounds right in front of this building, it says in 1670 or 1760, whichever one it is, that we had our first plan of conservation and development in this town. So the year that this town was incorporated, we had our first plan. The idea is not to usurp the power of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The idea is to work in concert with. The Planning and Zoning Commission by statute can only do what it is authorized by statute. It doesn't have the power to create a commission like what is anticipated here. For that reason, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted in favor of having this implementation committee. They're saying we want the help. All they can do is say, here's a subcommittee of us, and attempt to invite participation. And as some of us know with like the last charter revision situation, just because somebody's invited doesn't mean they show up to the meetings. When you have input from all of these various groups, and the steering committee, you know, sitting on the steering committee, being involved, having the discussions was very helpful to me in the process. And that's essentially what this is. You know, the state statute doesn't say how the steering committee is comprised of in toto, but we decided as a town to have a steering committee made up of very similar membership as is anticipated with the implementation committee. I think that I don't want to sit on it, I'll tell you that. I think it's important, and while it would not have any power in and of itself, we have commissions in town that don't have any power. I mean, the Public Celebrations Committee doesn't have any power, and this is similar. We spend $70,000 on this. I think we should take it a little serious. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, echo the sentiments that Councilor Fishbein just brought forward. I sat on the last committee, the last POCD, 10 years ago, and went through basically the same process, a little different, but the end result was the same. And I think the frustrating part with that was it sat on a shelf for 10 years, and there was nothing done. going into this, I asked to be on this because I felt that going into it that maybe there would be a glimmer to do this and go through the process again. But I had mentioned that at the very first meeting, sitting in that front row, that I felt we needed an implementation committee. And what this committee does, you're right, it's been talked about, and there is no regulatory that they can set regulations that, you know, they're basically an advisory committee. But that's how this document was put together. This document was put together with a commission that really had no, it was a steering committee, but it had no power. All it was to bring ideas forward. And look what came out of it. This document, which is a great document. So I think the idea would be to do the same thing with another committee. And I understand, Mr. Chairman, that, you know, you don't want to put another layer on, but, you know, we did already, and it's worked good. And I think we can continue with that same vein, not to force anybody or force any one group in here or department in here to do anything, but I think it's good to have a committee put together to ask questions and you know, continue with public input. Make this a working, living document that it'll continue on and people get involved. And, you know, this is for the betterment of the town. This is not for any one particular somebody's agenda. This is for the good of the town. And I just see the committee as helping this, because my biggest fear is this gets approved and it gets put on the shelf for another 10 years. And I mean, if we were going to do that, we could have saved $70,000, tore the cover off the old one, and just resubmitted it to the state of Connecticut. That would have been the easy thing to do and save $70,000. So let's think a little differently. Let's put this committee together and try something new. Try something new. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The only thing you said that I would voice disagreement with is that this committee had no power. I think the committee created a powerful document, and it obviously was a committee that spent a lot of time working on this and cares deeply about the future of the town. So I want to give credit to the committee for the work it did, and I think this is a powerful document. Any other comments from the council? Councilor Letourneau.
I agree with you. I agree with you to a point that, but the committee had no authority to go into a department and start digging through the department, or, you know, this was a committee put together for ideas, to bring ideas and take what we heard from the public coming to different committee members and bringing it forward into workshops. And there, good Lord, there was plenty of workshops. And, you know, and they covered a lot of things. But that's what it was. It was an advisory committee to form this document. So, thank you.
Certainly. Councilor Shortell.
A quick question. Great work on this. I'm inclined to agree with Chairman Cervoni about not wanting to add another layer. You've heard me say this at the Ordinance Committee, but I do want to ask, what do other towns and cities do that have this? I mean, do you know what the trend is in the state? Do they have implementation committees?
There are, I did reach out to some of the other towns, and Rebecca and Mylon and McBroom as a consulting firm can speak on this. There are a fair number of other communities that have done this or some version of this. So it's really been I don't think there's a specific model as to exactly how it's been done, but it has been done. And the communities that I heard back from I got very positive responses from those communities. What I see as the major benefit of some sort of group is that the recommended members of the implementation committee are representatives of the agencies that are the agencies that would be the agencies that would take up these tasks. So to me, I see the benefit less as being sort of the plan of development enforcement officers, and more as that this is an opportunity for those agencies to talk to one another, or representatives from those agencies to talk to one another about where they might be or which recommendations they might be pursuing. A lot of the recommendations require coordination between different agencies, so it would be an opportunity for them to talk. From my perspective, I think the form that it takes is more, I've debated that a lot myself, what would be the most appropriate form, and I really think the form that it takes, it really, I think the membership is really what kind of will be the driving factor. So I think that exactly how it's developed is really up to the community, whatever the community sort of decides, whether, but that being said, what the steering committee at this point did decide to recommend is an ordinance. If an ordinance, or is a formation by the town council. If that weren't done, we would probably have the option to pursue something sort of less informal, probably along the lines of a subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which would contain members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then they would sort of have conversations with the various agencies. But I do think there's a benefit to having the group come together, at least on occasion.
I would just add, we have seen several different iterations of this in other communities. In some, the steering committee lives on, and they are, the default implementation committee. In some communities, it is a subcommittee of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they are, actively trying to engage the other boards and commissions along the way. So there's a variety of ways to approach it. It does, when there is such an emphasis on implementation, it sort of is the hallmark of a good plan, because you really have a community that wants it implemented.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just by way of example, one of the things in the you'll see not a flow chart, but a spreadsheet at the end of the document that has an action plan, so to speak. And it's set up by priority and how long things are supposed to take and that kind of stuff. And one of the examples is that the Board of Education inventory the properties that they have. Now that's something that okay, so Planning and Zoning wants to know where that is. They could invite Board of Ed to come to one of their meetings or whatever. Board of Ed doesn't have to come to their meeting. I would assume that they would, but whatever. As opposed to the implementation committee would have a designee from the Board of Ed, as the steering committee did, had a designee from the Board of Ed, who could, report to the chair or however they choose to do that. And it's disposed of perhaps or worked out, or it goes to the Planning and Zoning Committee for maybe a flesh out or modification or whatever from there. That's just one little example. Another one is the Conservation Commission approached the state of Connecticut with regard to possibly dredging North Farms Reservoir for more recreational activity. Same sort of thing. Okay, Conservation Committee, Conservation Commission appointee, where are you on this? They could invite them in, or it could be part of the group. I think having inclusiveness, having these individuals in a group where they can discuss is just more beneficial to our town. It's not looking to create another layer, just to have something done here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Shortell.
I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, Councilor Fishbein, but the way the committee was represented, at least in the Record Journal article a few months ago, it would meet like twice a year. So in your example, well, that's how it was represented, was it would not meet that often.
No.
How often would it meet? Every month or every?
The recommendation was to meet quarterly and to hold regular public forums. I think an element, just to speak for the rest of the steering committee as well, an element of the idea of the implementation committee was that there would be public forums to sort of increase the sense of accountability, not just to boards and commissions reporting to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but that it would be out in the public so that there is public accountability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I still am not convinced that it's that much more efficient than just having them call the commission they need before planning and zoning, but I see what you're saying.
Anybody want to talk about any other part of the plan? It's quite a large document.
You brought it up.
Well, then there'd be no discussion on the plan.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Zandri.
I just have a quick little thing on it, which is kind of near and dear to me over the years. And I know it's mentioned a couple of times in the document about more sustainable ability to get bicycling as part of the modes of transportation to the downtown. With that, you have to look at places for people to lock it up. And I see a couple of bike racks in here, but there's incentives here. It identifies business incentives and or requirements, during, up in the town center. But when we look at that, just my own peace of mind, I'd like to almost see that more solid than an incentive and, hey, it's a good idea to have, because it's been a good idea to have for 20 years in this town. We talked about it, putting it up in front of Simpson Court when we identified it, when we did the Wood and Kaplan property. There were supposed to be bike racks put in the back for people to use, and they never materialized. So I ride downtown. I take my kids downtown, and there's no place for us. When there used to be a smaller ice cream shop down from Mr. D's, then there's the other one on the other side. There's no place to lock up the bikes, not unless you want us to use the ornamental lighting, which nobody wants us to do, because you're going to scratch up the paint on it. So I think if we encourage more of that and maybe mandate where a couple of them must go, even if it's on the town's dime, we outline where they're going to be and just place them. That's the only thing I want to kind of outline with that piece of it.
The one maybe difficulty with that is we can't mandate anything. So the plan of development can't mandate anything. It can make strong recommendations. That did come up recently in our discussion. The Planning and Zoning Commission had their first discussion, sort of initial workshop about the parking in the downtown area. And one of the things we can do as part of that is to sort of encourage provision of the bike stands on private development. I mean, the other option is for the town to pursue doing that.
Well, I don't know. Why can't we get creative? If we have a situation where someone comes to zoning, whether it's zoning or the Zoning Board of Appeals, and says, look, I know we need 1.5 spaces. We'd like to get away with 1.25. Why can't we say, you know what, or even have a discussion with, Zoning Board of Appeals or whatever the case might be. If you want the reduction, put a bike rack in.
That was how it came up in conversation the other day, was that one of the recommendations was that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider we talked about a lot of different options in terms of reducing parking requirements and shared parking and a lot of those other things. And one of the suggestions that was made was that a parking reduction, one of the parking reductions, or that an additional parking reduction would be allowed if someone provided bike stands. I think that we are looking, and I think that's something that we can consider and look at as part of that discussion.
Well, obviously with such a large focus of what we're trying to do, I know that becomes a small piece on the radar, but I'm just talking about anything we can do, whether it's part of this project or a part of your office, to reduce another car from coming downtown. It helps. And we've literally been talking about bike racks in Wallingford for decades. It really has been decades. So I appreciate anything we can do to get creative about it. And if your office comes back, or even as part of this effort, says, you know what, maybe the town should just drop a couple, put one over there. That's going to be permanent parking over at Wood and Kaplan. If the decision gets made, we should put them in and just be done with it. We spend $1,500 on ornamental lighting. We could spend $500 on a bike rack.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive of the bike rack concept, too. My concern is, doesn't some of the case law say the P&Z has a limited ability to impose ancillary requirements?
Right. They could allow it as an option, but they couldn't require it. In terms of the plan of development, what we could do is put in a statement along the lines of, encouraging alternative modes of transportation.
Well, again, I guess my question would be, if they have the power and ability to grant an exception, why can't they say based on this contingency?
Because the Supreme Court has said you have a limited ability to do that.
Well, then don't give them the variance next time. I don't know what else to say about it.
The reasoning would be because a reduction in parking requirements is really best handled through the zoning regulations themselves as opposed to a variance where you have to demonstrate a hardship. So if there's a legitimate hardship in the land as to why you can't provide parking, I think they'd be hard pressed to put that type of condition onto it because either you can or you can't, essentially. But in the planning and in the zoning regulations, they can provide for incentives along those lines, but they can't require it. So they could say you could reduce your parking if you do A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, and that would be the mechanism they'd have.
As long as we try something to encourage it. I mean, I appreciate the effort regardless. So thank you both.
Mayor?
Yes, I agree. Great effort on the plan. Very interesting. I'm going to raise a subject, though, that is not going to be new to anyone. I notice on page 28 and 26 and 27, two areas of the downtown that have received enormous attention and effort and planning, both of which have not come to fruition because of a failed consensus, amongst other things. So they're mentioned in here with drawings showing what's possible, and it all looks great, but knowing what the history have been, I do hope that there'll be an ability to break through whatever barriers have been to achieve that, because those areas are some of the keys to the downtown. And as you know, we have money for one of the large parking lots across from the railroad station. And we're hopeful that that will be improved in the not too distant future once engineering's finished design. But the two on the pages, there's nice drawings, but they do deserve attention. The question is, in the old story about who puts the bell on the cat. There have been proposals, they've been rejected, and here we are with a plan to say something should be done.
Thank you. Ms. Auger, I think you wanted to say something.
Just getting back to Councilor Zandri's comment, there is a recommendation to improve provide transportation alternatives to Wallingford destinations, which talks about the Economic Development Commission actually partnering with local employers to develop and promote incentives for commuters to use alternative modes such as carpooling, bike, transit.
Yeah, I did see that. Thank you, though, for pointing out.
Thank you. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know who here. Mayor, do you know how many bike racks are on the Wood and Kaplan property?
Offhand, I don't know if there are any private ones. It was discussed about putting a public one, but it's so remote from an area that someone would want to go to a store. The thought was a better site would be at the end of the Simpson Court area. There's an island, not the island itself, but just prior to the property owned by Library Bistro. would be a possibility, but
You're talking about...
there were discussions with John Thompson before he left.
My question was with regard to the Wooden Cow, because the Library Bistro is at Simpson Court.
It's at Simpson Court. Yeah, well, there was a thought of putting bike racks back in behind the area you're talking about, Wood and Kaplan, but it's so far removed from where anyone would go. I certainly have my doubts that anyone will leave a bike there and have the walk from there to whatever store they're going to go into. I think most people like to have their bike pretty much in view.
Well, I seem to recall that when the plans for what was going to be done back there, including doing the Wallace Avenue and going to the police station, I think it showed 3 bike racks in the drawings, and we were pretty excited about that. And, you know, while Councilor Zander brings up bike racks, I don't know why, you know, we've talked about they aren't that expensive. In fact, I think we presented a funky one, sort of ergonomic, not ergonomic, but it was like curved instead of being traditional, sort of like worked into the landscape. And I don't know why.
I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to check with engineering.
Okay, I think I still have the drawings in the office, but, you know, your allusion to the, that's A, not illusion, but allusion, to the Simpson Court parking lot and how this plan has a drawing in it. This plan is void as to who's going to pay for it. And I think one of the major problems with the plan previously was that the taxpayers are going to pay for it. I don't think anywhere in there it says that the town is supposed to pay for redoing that lot. So I think there's a consensus that that lot should be done at some level. And I would agree that it hasn't been maintained since 1961 when the town agreed to maintain it. And it does need at least resurfacing or something like that. But I just wanted to point that out. I don't think that plan says anywhere that the whole bill, so to speak, should fall on the taxpayers.
But the plan does talk about public-private partnerships. It talks about incentives. If we're relying upon private parties to totally take the cost of improving private property for public use, this is going to have a very difficult time seeing any improvements occur.
I think a public-private partnership is more equitably based than a $10,000 expenditure by a property owner. If the plan was to do $250 from the property owners and $250 from the taxpayers, that is a public-private partnership. When you throw a coupon on it, it's just not. So I just want to, that plan does not say that the taxpayers should shoulder 90% of the burden of redoing that lot. That's pretty clear. I know that that's not in there.
I just am pointing out that there is such exact standards for exactly how anything can occur. Hitting the right formula has been almost impossible. That is the issue.
Well, I can tell you that I sat down with one of those property owners, and there was more money offered to me, and that never came before us. So we'll leave it at that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments on the plan by the council? Councilor Letourneau.
So we covered parking lots in the last half hour. We've covered bike racks in the last half hour. And going back to the bike racks, I've heard Councilor Zandri say, we've been talking about bike racks for decades. And I haven't been downtown in decades, but I've been there for 16 years, and I know 16 years we've been talking about bike racks. But that's exactly what happens in the parking. That's exactly what happens. We might have talked about it. I think we talked about it. We could have, would have, should have. That's what I hear. And it feeds into the argument of the need of an implementation committee. because this is what's going to get exactly what we did here tonight is going to happen in the implementation committee. But at least the implementation committee can vet all of this out and then possibly start asking some questions. It's like, okay, well, we came up with a solution. This is how we can do bike racks. And bring it to the council, let them sit right at that bench there and possibly bring it to the council and say, this is how it can be done, and you might have to put this money towards it, or we found another way to finance it, but we won't know this until somebody does it. And we're not going to do it up here. We're just not going to do it. So, you know, all of this, what we talked about tonight, and this was a good discussion for bike racks and parking, but it feeds into the rest of the document, and this is something that an implementation committee can vet out. So, thank you.
Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. I wasn't going to talk, but the implementation committee, that's no different than any of us sitting up here. We haven't gotten a bike rack in the past couple of years, but nobody here has brought it up or had meetings and gone down and done anything about it. Just because you'd have a sticker on your jacket saying you're on the implementation committee doesn't mean it's going to happen any faster. I think I'm always leery about adding another level or form of government. The difference between the committee that established and was formed for this document was to gather recommendations, and look what they did. We have a great recommendation. We have a great set. The difference between that and executing and operating and administrating are completely different. And I don't think we should limit ourselves to just the members of that implementation committee. We should all be paying attention to it, and future members of planning and zoning should be paying attention to it, not the two that get appointed to the committee. You know, and if planning and zoning wants to have a subcommittee, then and I think if it's more their vote than ours, then that's great. At this point, I haven't been convinced to create a committee at the council level by ordinance, and I can hear Councilor Letourneau's ready to talk, but I'm almost done. I just don't see that. So Councilor Fishbein talked about the implementation committee asking, you know, appointees, and well, what do you feel about this and this? So now we're having this committee is meeting more often, as Councilor Shortell pointed out, and they're applying a litmus test to appointees. And that's stuff that we should all be doing all the time. And if we are not inspired or influenced enough by the document as elected officials or appointed officials to do it, then it's going to fail anyway. And it doesn't matter if 9 or 10 people meet every quarter.
13.
13. That's it.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm trying to remember whether, and we're starting to skirt away a little bit from this, but I'm going to go back to the bike racks. I'm trying to remember whether I was sitting here or out there when we discussed it, but this came up on a plan. There were plans, drawings, and I talked to Mr. Thompson whether I was here or out there, and I said, so there'll be 2 or 3. They talked about where they were going to go with respect to the lights, whether it was going to be near the decorative lighting or the overhead lighting. It was in a plan. So once you have that discussion and vote on something that's in a plan, and then you walk away from the plan, you make the assumption, well, the shrubs are going to be there, the lines are going to be painted, the lights are going to be put up, the bike racks are going to go in. And then suddenly the bike racks aren't there. And I'm going to disagree with the mayor that somebody wouldn't park their bike back there and walk forward. They parked their car back there and walk forward. Why wouldn't they park their bike? I parked my bike back there when I was 12 years old and Kaplan's Market was still there. So, I mean, I don't want to go too far down the bike road here, but we've had things on plans that don't get done, and it gets voted here, and then a decision gets made, and maybe it's a legitimate one that it doesn't go somewhere, but it should be brought back and said, listen, we've had to make a change. There was a liability issue. There was a problem with mounting and posting it, but then it just doesn't get done, and it disappears. And I think we've seen just recently with the donation from Choate, with the benches downtown, that it might have even cost us a dime. We could probably have somebody step forward and pay for the things if we're just willing to put it in. I think the issue here is we never really see that commitment level to do it because it could have been done already. And I didn't want to go too far in it, but we keep circling back on it, and it's a big deal to me because we have talked about it. We thought they were going in, they never go in, and then we come back to, gee, there's no oversight. That's not true. It should have been done because it was on a set of plans. If somebody delivered a set of plans to planning and zoning as an example, I'm not picking on you, and then didn't carry through with them, they would have to explain why this was on and didn't get done. But when it's our own work, we kind of skirt around it. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, no one has come to me about bike racks. If that's such a large issue, why have I not heard about it since it appeared or it became the focus of attention at some point? I don't even remember when, but if that has been such a large issue, then something should be said at some point.
Mr. Mayor, it just did.
Councilor Testa.
Thank you. Good evening. That was a fantastic pun. I don't want to go down the bike road. I loved it. I thought you were going to say I don't want to cycle back either. That was good, very good, and good points were made. This is great. I commend everybody who worked so hard on this. I've been around for a few years, and a couple of these I've seen, and it has come up in the past. You know, why do we even do this? In the past, it's been said, we never do anything with it. I think that's a little bit exaggerated. It is some type of guiding document, but it appears to me that this time around, right from the beginning, there seemed to be the impetus to make this relevant, make it something that we're going to do something with, and it sounds like that's where we're going. So I'm very excited about that. Today, I was driving down Washington Street, and I decided that I was going to ask for an agenda item within the next month or two to talk about how a use for the boathouse property, the Chode Boathouse property. When we decided to acquire it, I'd expressed an interest in having it be developed as an environmental study, environmental science, educational center, and everything that comes along with that. And that's what I want to propose. I don't want to see us sitting on it and not doing anything with it, and nor do I want to see, frankly, a more narrowly focused interest come in and express, a desire to take it and use it. You know what I mean? I don't want to see that happen. Of course, some people could say that that's what I'm doing, but anyway, that's what I want to see done there. I'm letting my fellow councilors know that right now. I'd like to see us talk about it soon. I want to see it developed in that way. And then I looked at your study and report, and I was excited to see that the group is looking at something similar, a little more wide-ranging. But my question would be, did you talk about having us formally disband the Community Lake Restoration Committee? I thought we already had, but technically maybe we never formally did that. Reform it as a Community Lake Recreation Area Committee. I love that. How would you respond to what I've just said? And would you say, hey, listen, that's what we were thinking about? It's probably a better idea to wait until something like this comes up. But then again, we'd have to be the ones to form this committee. So are you at a point with this that you would like us to take it on like right now, start talking about it like that now?
Well, I think your question and some of the previous conversations sort of ties together in terms of how the plan of development is intended to work. So in the plan of development, I think probably the sort of crucial component is the part in the back, is the spreadsheet in the back that has recommendations for each agency and then prioritizes them and gives a timeline for them. And then it's really up to each agency to take those up or not take those up, or how much to take those up. We're saying, that certain things are higher priority recommendations, lower priority recommendations. Obviously, that's based on, availability of finances and timing and all of that. But I think that the plan is sort of looking at what did the steering committee and what does the town feel are the most important things? And I believe Community Lake was identified as one of the top priorities.
It was identified as a high priority with a short-term timeframe put on it, which was, from now to out 3 years or so, and in part because it's broader than just the boathouse. The committee was thinking of it as the entire area, and it's knitting together the trail, the community lake itself, the boathouse, SCOW, the senior center, all of that, knitting all of that together and really planning for the entire area. And so I think the recommendation was to get a committee that is representative of all the groups that would be interested, including the Board of Ed, the schools, the Parks and Rec, Youth Services, SCOW, Senior Center, all those groups together to start coming up with a plan. That is the short-term interest.
So to answer your question, I think the answer would be the plan would recommend that, yes, you take that up soon.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, if we started talking about it and trying to come up with an idea, maybe we would like to commit to some type of use for it or not. Would that preempt a committee that might be considering it as well? That's what I'm getting at.
I think the steering committee would hope that you would think about the broader area before committing. But
that's why I'm asking. Yes, okay, that sounds good. I do want to talk about it anyway, but I see where you're going with that. I want a broad use. I call it something, but I envision something available to everyone with a focus towards environmental study. Call it what you want. Right. You know what I mean? That's what I'm looking for. Nature center, I like that. Call it a nature center. A place, and everybody, senior center might want a place to walk to. Yes, so that's not hard to set up, you know what I mean?
And that was exactly the conversation. I think the concern was just that all of the parties that might have an interest in using that facility in whatever form it takes, be part of the discussion on the commitment.
Got it. And that makes sense. When you talk, I've lived here my whole life, and I remember at one point somebody telling me that there was a time when there was a proposal to build a bridge across Community Lake, or that area, across Quinnipiac, at Parker Farms Road. 150 on Parker Farms Road, the Texaco station, right? Right there, or pretty close to that. It might have been down a little ways. I don't know if that's necessarily the place or a fact, but I've always thought, gosh, too bad we didn't do it, because we really need that third east-west way of travel. And you mentioned that here. What did you have in mind? What I did notice, honestly, is I noticed work with SCROG. I can say SCROG, right? Is that what you call it? Work with SCROG, work with SCROG, work with SCROG. Is that really, is that potentially fruitful?
Is that a fish?
What's that? Go say what?
Is that a fish?
Yes. No, it's an amphibian. But what were you thinking? Did the committee actually say there's an area where we'd like to go? Because you have to go over the Quinnipiac across areas that are not necessarily bridge friendly.
So while the committee was really driven to create a plan that could be implemented, this is a policy guidance document that the state looks at. They do review these. And so there was acknowledgement that getting the third east-west crossing is a, pie-in-the-sky idea. But it needs to be in documents. It needs to be carried forward if it's ever going to happen.
I see what you mean. That's right. So as a just in case, if...
Not just in case, but to keep it on everyone's radar screen.
Right.
That this is an issue for this community, And if there ever is an opportunity to address it, or if there ever are decisions to be made on property acquisition in an area that, you get referrals as the town council on major 8-24 referrals to you on major decisions such as that this is in the back of your mind.
Right. And is it your feeling that something such as this, where inevitably you'd be seeking assistance or guidance or whatever, money, if it wasn't in your plan of development, forget about it. So that's what I meant by just in case. So as a guiding document, okay.
When the town applies for grants, anything associated with land use or anything along those lines, the state or whatever the granting agency is usually looks for it to be consistent and discussed and anticipated in our plan of development.
Yeah, certainly that makes sense. Did you specifically take up because about 8 years ago, 8 years ago, I know the mayor could probably remember, the state came to us and we talked about the plans, really good plans that were drawn up to widen Route 5 right about at the farm stand that's now coming down. Did you talk about that particular location and those plans that had been drawn up by the state for the widening of Route 5 at that point?
I believe that some of the issues, so we didn't discuss, or the plan doesn't make recommendations on a property-by-property basis.
Right.
But we did discuss in the transportation section, in the transportation discussions,
right,
previous recommendations that had been made with Route 5 and potential needs in association with Route 5, including, I believe it addresses left turn the center left turn lanes and the potential widening of Route 5. And again, that would be to our benefit if we were to look to the state and look to COG to promote something along those lines, then we can point to it as being in the plan.
Okay. So a lot of somewhat specific recommendations, however, not plan specific.
Well,
right, and that's kind of the idea of this, right? And then leave it to whomever is going to dive in to then look at a specific idea.
Yes.
Right, or specific plan or so forth.
The recommendation for Route 5, though, does specifically refer to the 2006 study.
Okay.
So it does refer to those plans, but it also adds to it that there may be additional needs identified south of the focus area of that study.
Oh, so that is the one that's on here. That's the one I was thinking of, right? I was curious about that. Okay. That's it for now for me. This is great. Thank you very much.
Mayor,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah, just quickly, in the course of that conversation, it just occurs to me, one maybe unintended issue, but an issue that arises with another committee would be, does that become another place to refer something in order to do one thing or another with it? But that needs to be understood, whether, an idea comes up, does it get referred to the implementation committee before it would go anywhere else? How does that function as an entity in our processes?
My thought is that the plan recommends that the implementation committee, if it were to be formed, would report to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I would think that the Planning and Zoning Commission would sort of decide whether or not to ask for input on a particular matter. Or presumably the implementation committee could choose to sort of weigh in on it if they wanted to. But I don't think any additional referrals would be legally required.
Well, except that the town council is setting up the committee. So now, before an item, you could arguably have someone say, before the town council should discuss it, it should go through the implementation committee. The implementation committee then reports to planning and zoning. I'm not sure how all of this coordinates in a typical format where ideas come up And, statutes indicate now where matters go and when we need that input. You'd want to be careful that it doesn't become something where it interrupts the planning and zoning timeline. There's a certain timeline. If it gets referred to the implementation committee first, that eats up time before planning and zoning would take up a matter. So again, it's a legalistic question I have, but it does present another entity of government that can call for a role to play. That may be an advantage at times, and it may be a disadvantage at other times.
Well, and I think that speaks to the point that's been discussed, which is that ultimately it's an advisory body. They don't have statutory authority to make any decisions. They would be an advisory body. So that carries sort of, as much or as little weight, I think, as is granted to them by the agencies they are associated with.
Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just taking off with that, the intent is, and we've discussed it once on the ordinance committee, we would create the rules by ordinance. We would give the implementation committee power or not. We could say that the Planning and Zoning Commission appoints the committee. We can do that by ordinance. As I said before, this is not an attempt to usurp the power of the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's to implement the plan. So we can create an ordinance and then step back and let happen what's going to happen. This is the membership, which the Planning and Zoning Committee or Commission has approved unanimously what would be the makeup of this body. It's in the plan that's in your hands. So we just say it's advisory. There is no, this smoke screen about it's another layer that somebody's got to go through an application. There's no, by state statute, you can't do that. You can't put another wall in front of planning and zoning application. It's fallacy. The work with SCROG, I think, appears in a few places in there. And, part of the, I guess, issue with that is that the mayor is the appointee on behalf of the town to SCROG. He is our representative. So the implementation committee perhaps would go to the mayor and say, this is part of the plan and, can you help us work this out? The boathouse, I really thank Councilor Testa for bringing up that example, because that's a really good example where I can think of three committees which would be involved in that discussion, in addition to the administration. Board of Ed, who'd possibly use it for educational purposes, the Conservation Commission, which, because there's open space and that kind of stuff, and Park and Rec, which would probably run a program out of there or two. I think they're all anticipated to be part of the implementation committee. So they can get together and talk about that. Councilor Laffin talked about a litmus test. There is no litmus test here. There is no, a litmus test is basically, how do you feel on a particular issue, and that determines whether or not you're going to sit on a commission. That isn't intended to happen here. Appointees from, the town council, for instance. There's two that are anticipated as part of this. We don't have litmus tests when we appoint somebody to a commission. We have two appointees on the 350th committee. There was no litmus test for that. To get on the steering committee for the Plan of Conservation Development, I wasn't queried as to my positions on various parts of the town. Are you interested? Okay, go for it. That's all that's anticipated here. There's no litmus test. And finally, bikes. Got to end with bikes. Because I haven't seen him in a while. I don't know, maybe he moved out of town. But remember Ben Ward? Okay. Ben Ward, who was on the Conservation Commission, would bike to the meetings.
I think you mean Ben Martin.
Ben Martin, I'm sorry. I think he lived on Ward. But anyway, Ben Martin, he would bike to the meetings, and continually he would bring up about bike racks and we would have the discussion, and it was part of that that fueled the bike racks that appeared on the plan for Wooding Kaplan. And that's where, Councilor Zandri, when that lot was being redone, it was represented to us there was going to be bike racks. I mean, there should be a bike rack out in front of this building, actually. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any comments from the public? Mr. Morgenstein, AKA half of the public.
My better half of the public is back there. Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. I want to thank Ms. Auger and Casey for the work that you did in putting together the steering committee. I was glad to be a peripheral part of it through Gina and when I was there. I think what really impressed me about the steering committee was that, and this would be true, I think, of the implementation committee too, is that there was a lot of stakeholders, and there was stakeholders throughout the government and also the public and private sectors. And I think what you have before you is a document that really reflects that. And that's part of the power of that document is that it reflects all those different stakeholders. I was real excited when there was 1,800 respondents to that survey. I know we really tried to push people. I know Councilor Fishbein, other people, every day we would push that to try to get people to respond, and they did. So the thing is that I think what you're thinking about tonight is how do we move this process forward? How do we keep the momentum? Because there is a momentum and there is an interest out there. And one of the things that I'll comment on is that I am kind of sad that in the implementation committee, if there is such a thing, we've lost public input on that and that there's no members of the public on that. I'm not sure why that omission is there because a large part of it or a good part of it was having people from the public be part of that. And again, I want to emphasize how much that document reflects community. So many people participated in it. And we could look at individual components, but I think you lose sight of the bigger picture of including everybody and keeping that momentum going. The mayor and other people have talked about how we've failed in some ways for individual projects, and that's true. That's a part of the history that we bear. But I think a big part of that, if we're going to surmount those failures, is involving the public, that people are still stakeholders in that. If there's no buy-in, we get divided. The more narrow the focus becomes, the more your vision becomes clouded and you don't include others, and that's where we fall apart. So I hope you do the implementation committee. I think, again, it keeps stakeholders from various groups. I'd like to see the public included, but it keeps communication flowing from the various groups, and it also allows more public input. So again, we all know the last document gathered dust, as it's been put many times. This time can be different, but what makes it different this time? What will make this time be something that pushes this forward in a way that the town, the community, will all get behind? And if we start narrowing that focus, I think the danger of that document becoming less and less a public document and not being implemented becomes greater. So I hope you keep that in mind. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Ms. Morgenstein, the other half of the public.
Gina Morgenstein, South Main Street. So before the POCD was formed, I had several visits to Mr. Letourneau's lamp shop, and we looked at the last document. It's like a nice little historic artifact sitting up on the shelf. If you guys don't do the right thing tonight, that's what this one's going to be. I I'm not happy. The fact is, a lot of work went into this. Just because it's state mandated doesn't make it wrong that it needs to get done. This town needs to get things done. Last time I stood up here, we were on a different topic, but it was, are we going to be left in the dust? Is Wallingford going to be left 32 years with the same man in charge leaving us in the dust? We worked hard on this document. We need to move it forward. Get it done.
Any other comments from the council? Councilor Fishbein?
Just briefly, somebody brought up about the public not being part of the the implementation committee as anticipated. I think the reason for that is that the public does not appear as part of the action plan. The action plan is really pretty specific as to perhaps what town commission, group, whatever, would be responsible, accountable for that particular item. While I do not anticipate being on such implementation committee, I leave it up to them how they would perhaps run their meetings. I think that they would open up to the public comment on whatever is before them, which is generally the plan. So I think the public would have some sort of input with the process and would not be shut out. And I don't want anybody to think that that would be the case. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Testa.
Thank you. I was just wanted to clarify. I understand and appreciate and respect Ms. Morgenstein's comments, Gina. But when you said get it done, that was implying tonight? Only because tonight we're just reviewing it to look at it, right? And then, but I mean, it will, June 6th, there's a public hearing, right? So I hope you encourage us to accept this and move forward. I thought you were implying we should get something done this evening. Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you. We're good. We're good. Because I didn't realize we were on. I'm good. Never mind. Blah, blah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and your tremendous amount of work through the process of developing this document. It's clearly praiseworthy, and I certainly am grateful. So.
Thank you. I also just wanted to thank Mylone and McBroom because they did a fabulous job and they made themselves very available to us. So are you prepared to just kind of move forward? You're comfortable with your review that you've done? You don't have any recommendations?
It doesn't seem that there's going to be any action tonight
Okay.
to recommend any changes. I think there's been some discussion, but nobody's prepared to make motions to make recommendations.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no other business on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the meeting adjourned.